Hi everyone, welcome to our short 10 to 15 minute video on Unit 531, Principles of Professional Coaching. Now I'm going to hand over to our tutor James, who's going to take you through the assignment. Thanks, James.
Charlotte. Just to lay this one out, it's a fairly straightforward structure of assignment, this one, which is good news. As we go into this, principles of professional coaching, I'm going to just remind you of kind of the three key rules that we might apply to writing assignments. The first is to make sure that we define the key terms, first of all, so we've got definitions to think about. Second is to make sure that we meet the command verb every time. In this assignment, there are a couple of evaluate questions, which I'll point out as we go through, which need particular attention at level 5. And then less is more as our final rule, which is where we're going to choose as many different arguments, theories, or examples as we need to do to answer the question. So we don't like, massive lists of things. We just need to get to the point of what the question's asking us to do and then stop. And I'll try and put those things into practice as we go through. But just to put that in mind before we begin, definitions, command verb, and less is more good rules to apply as we go through. So here we're going to look at the idea of professional coaching as a professional practice. Again, relatively straightforward. A couple of things to bear in mind as we go through this one. And let's get straight into it. 2 learning outcomes. The first is to understand the principles of professional coaching. And we have 4 questions to address for this learning outcome. First one then, discuss the benefits of professional coaching. So straight away, definitions here. We're going to put a definition of coaching out there using whichever models, theories, authors that you wish to do, but we're going to try and make sure we've got a nice definition of professional coaching in there to kick us off on this assignment. And then that's the key term of the whole assignment, really. Our command verb here is discuss. This will mean that in your answer, it's important to look at the thing from different perspectives. So we're going to look at the benefits from different stakeholders' perspectives, for example. But also within that, you might discuss benefits, including, how big are the benefits to some extent, or what might be some of the provisos underneath that. So just a little bit of a discussion looks at the thing from different perspectives, different angles. It's important to try to execute that when you answer this question here. And in terms of less is more or benefits is a plural, we're not going to try and list out as many different benefits as we can possibly think of here. We're going to select maybe 3, 4, 5 key benefits and discuss each of them so we can apply the command verb for this one. So that would be how we're going to structure it. In terms of the benefits, as an indicative content we can see here, that might include benefits to the coachee. What might they be? Benefits to teams or groups, it mentions as well. It could be something else that you discuss. It could be benefits to the whole organization. Another benefit, I think, that isn't mentioned here actually, which I think perhaps should be, is benefit to the coach themselves. And I probably would encourage you to think about that angle as well as another benefit you might want to discuss. So we're going to think around the act of professional coaching in an organization. What might be a range of benefits to different stakeholders? What might be some of the provisos required underneath them to make them a benefit in practice? Yeah, so it's a nice discussion, not just a list, but a discussion here is necessary for 1.1. 1.2 now is asking you to evaluate professional coaching with other methods that support the development of individuals. For this one, the first thing to define here would be you might put a little bit to start around what development of individuals means, and you could maybe use a model or theory or what have you around that. So it could be something like situation leadership or something like that you might reference here, for example. What does development of individuals look like? But then, moreover, it would be necessary here to identify several specific methods that do the job of supporting development of individuals that are in addition to coaching. So again, examples given here could include mentoring, training, counselling, consulting. Doesn't matter, you don't need to choose as many as you can think of, but you need to do at least 2 additional methods than coaching here to evaluate. So you're going to list them all out. You're going to say, okay, this method, how does that compare to coaching as a mechanism to support development of individuals? What's your view on how professional coaching works alongside other methods? What does it do that other methods don't do? What might they do that it doesn't do? What's your view? And evaluate questions, really important that we look at the pros and cons and whys and wherefores of the thing, but you need to come up with a view and a reasoned judgment in the end. That's what the evaluate means you to do. So without that, you will get referred on this question straight away. So it's really important that you have a view of what you think professional coaching does compared to other methods that support individuals. 1.3 then, analyze the roles and responsibilities for delivering and managing professional coaching. So with this one, we might want to just define stakeholders really around the professional coaching instance. So who is there around this that may be responsible for delivering it or for managing its delivery? And again, indicative content talks about the coach themselves, could be an external coach, internal coach, could be a leader that does a bit of coaching as a curbside job rather than sit down big conversations all the time. It could be the coachee themselves. It could be the sponsor, the person paying for or sponsoring the coaching to happen. Coach supervisor is another potential one. Again, what we're not looking to do here is necessarily list all the different roles and responsibilities you can possibly think of. You know, have a fair few here to demonstrate you understand the complexity of potential stakeholders around coaching in an organization. But what we need to do is for each of those stakeholders, look at their roles and responsibilities in as much as that might deliver coaching or manage it and analyze those roles and responsibilities. So in some detail, what do you think they are? What value do they add to the process? How critical might they be to the process of delivering and managing professional coaching? All that kind of stuff comes into play. So we identify different stakeholders, what their different roles and responsibilities. That might lend itself to like a bullet point or paragraph type structure here potentially, and then analyze each of them with a little bit of detail underneath each of those. 1.4, evaluate the ethical and legal frameworks which inform professional coaching. What I'd be tempted to do here is 2 paragraphs or a couple of sections, one of which deals with ethical frameworks, another which might deal with legal frameworks. Could be a little bit different. Ethical could be the stuff that are chosen to do for values-based reasons, for example, or optics. Whereas legal frameworks with mandatory stuff you'd need to bear in mind, such as things like GDPR, for example. What we want to do is choose framework like ethical and legal frameworks. You can use some real examples here to help you. You might have something in your organizations, or you can use a code of ethics that you brought from one of the accrediting or supervisory bodies out there, such as the MCC. So it's good to bring in some external source of what an ethical framework might look like or a legal framework might be. And if you've got organization policies around this, or you can find an example, and that'd be good here as well. And then your job is to evaluate those frameworks. That means what do you think about them, good and bad, like in terms of what are they trying to do? How effective might the frameworks be in doing that in your view? How important do you think they really are? What might be, for example, some of the consequences if we don't operate the frameworks? This is all part of that evaluation. What do you think of the frameworks? Is what we're trying to get to in this question here. Learning outcome 2 then is to understand the process for contracting and delivering professional coaching. This is kind of on the sharp end now as a professional coach in practice. 2.1, the first question now is to evaluate the role and purpose of contracting in professional coaching. I think here it's important to, as part of this actually, and it just what the question asks you to do anyway, but define what we mean by contracting. What does it look like? What does it operate? What's it designed to do? All that kind of comes in naturally to this question anyway, in your definition of contracting. I think it's important, again, we've got to evaluate command and verbs. This is, you've got to have a view on what you think the role and purpose of contracting really is in professional coaching. That might include what it doesn't do, what it isn't. We want to think around some of the pros and cons of the contracting. We want to think around, again, what might happen if we don't contract effectively is a good way to flip that into an evaluation type thinking, some critical thinking in place here. But overall, what's your view on the role of contracting and professional coaching and why we have it? So what is it and why do we do it? It needs to be in the answer somewhere. Again, the indicative content gives you some ideas around this. There are different ways to contract, of course. You might consider the difference between continuous recontracting and a professional engagement versus setting something out in stone from the beginning and just going on with that. It's important to understand that contracting also works with different stakeholders. So it's not just coach and coachee. There could well be, usually are, relationships between coach and organization, sponsor who's paying for it could be different from who's receiving it. So it's understanding how that contracting framework and web might work around the coaching itself. And 2.2 finally is discuss the process for delivering professional coaching. Here, we want to kind of identify a process. You could again bring in some external models and theories and frameworks here, or use what you use at work, or a bit of both. What we're going to do is lay out a process for delivering professional coaching from beginning to end. It's going to be a whole process right through the intervention, not just the conversations and themselves, but what happens before and after them. And then my advice would be to discuss each of the steps in the process and the process overall. So again, the discussion means look at it from different perspectives, different stakeholders maybe, but also maybe just some of the kind of pros and cons resource requirements for each of those steps. Takes it along from being just a list of the process into a discussion of the process, which is where I want to get to for the assignment. And again, some indicative content here might lay out some of the kind of steps in that process you could think around, and a couple of authors, including Starr, Hawkins and Turner and and one or two other bits and pieces in there as well. So that's the assignment. The main thing, again, to reiterate, is make sure you've got your definitions nice and clear from the outset. It's a fairly straightforward assignment, the great scheme of things. So make sure you pay attention to those command verbs in particular, and make sure you've not just listed things, but done the discussions and evaluations that have been asked for throughout.
Thank you very much, James. We hope that you have found this helpful. If you do have any other questions, please don't hesitate to contact us on cmi@inpd.co.uk. We look forward to seeing your assignments coming in very soon. Thank you very much.